Right, hi there everyone, Adam Clery from FourFourTwo here, and to everybody who's been asking me, when are you going to do another retro tactics video, Adam? I thought you said they were going to be like a regular thing, and it's been actual months. Now, doing it now. And since it is the international break, so everybody's kind of thinking about England, and since we're only a few months away from the summer where they maybe should have won something, and since we're also not that far away from his untimely passing, I thought we would look at Sven's England, and specifically why I think they should have won the World Cup. But the thing is, normally when you talk about Sven's England maybe winning the World Cup, this is the Sven's England people assume you are talking about, because it's got some of the best players ever to grace the Premier League in it. But I'm not talking about this Sven's England. Talking about this Sven's England. This England side, for a number of reasons that we will now go through, was for a very long time as good as it got. Now, full disclosure, straight off the bat, if you are a regular viewer to this channel, you will know that we like using fancy visualizations like pass maps that show you what a player was up to, little heat maps that show you where they were on the pitch, either in one game or across a number of games, average positions that tell the real story of a formation rather than just what's on the little card they fill out at the start. There's none of those here. We are going back in time to the turn of the millennium here, when pop stars looked like this, mobile phones looked like this. I was obsessively playing Pokemon Silver and was like second or third best at it in the whole school. But crucially, no companies were collecting clever bits of data that could then be visualized about football matches yet. So a lot of this, you are just going to have to trust that I have done my homework for this, okay? And I promise I have. Now, to start this tale, we must go back all the way to the year 2000 itself, because I think it gets forgotten just how down bad England were as a national football team at the time. Kevin Keegan had just resigned as England manager, having lost the last ever game at the original Wembley Stadium to Germany of all teams. And this, believe it or not, was his 11 in that game. This sort of 3-5-2 with very defensive wing-backs. He'd basically come up with this idea as a response to how bad they'd been at Euro 2000. Now, they were slightly unlucky in that tournament. The Phil Neville penalty knocked them out when they probably should have gone through, and they did beat Germany in that tournament, which was quite the achievement. But the fact is, they'd conceded 3 goals in that tournament to both Portugal and Romania, and Keegan had just decided they were way too wide open. And the thing you've got to remember as well is that going into Euro 2000, things actually looked pretty rosy. Like, you had these big name established stars like Shearer, Gascoigne, Ince, Adams, all being successfully moulded with a new crop of talent like Beckham, Scholes and Owen. People fancied England, following France 98, to go on and do really well for the next couple of years. But then you get to this dreary, grey, miserable, rainy afternoon in the year 2000, and Shearer and Ince have both retired. Adams is on the verge of doing it. Gascoigne hasn't kicked a ball in 3 years for his country. And about, say, 60 to 70% of the male population of England want to kick David Beckham's teeth in. And understandably quite spooked about their defensive frailties at Euro 2000, Keegan had envisaged this system that was supposed to be very stable. And you've got 3 good centre-backs there, but none of whom play in a back 3, and 2 really good wing-backs there, neither of whom played as wing-backs, and 2 excellent wingers in Barmby and Beckham, both really narrow. You've got Paul Scholes in the centre, and obviously that is a midfield of very high quality, but not a lot of like sort of rugged get-about-a-lot-edness, which I may have just made up. And then 2 strikers up front who obviously are capable of scoring loads of goals, but obviously require quite a lot of service to do so. And your 2 best providers aren't in their best position, and the 2 people in the best position, like, there's just a lot of very talented square pegs in round holes here. And if you are a team that has like good attacking sort of aggressive wingers and can push these 2 wing backs back, you basically stop England doing anything. Now, don't get me wrong, you can definitely see how this is supposed to work. Like, Gareth Southgate was a good ball-playing, ball-carrying centre-back for the time. He would clearly get forward and sort of sit in the midfield with Scholes offering that sort of defensive midfield position, and that would then allow Barmby and Beckham to sort of move out a little bit wider. But it's just such an awkward way to try and do what is effectively still just a 4-4-2. And yeah, just inevitably it wasn't very good. Keegan held his hands up and admitted he didn't really know how to fix this. He resigned, everybody was miserable, and it was going to take an absolute madman to take over the England job that year. But thankfully for this great nation, the only thing Sven-Göran Eriksson liked more than the lasses was a challenge. He was appointed in 2001, and following on from this 1-0 loss to Germany, a 0-0 with Finland made it look like England may well have already stuffed up World Cup qualification when he took the helm. And the first thing he did was he looked at these players and he looked at this system and just thought, nah, this ain't it for this group, and it certainly ain't it for this nation, and he returned England to exactly what it says on the sign above the door, a proper 4-4-2. But the really smart thing that he did, and this is going to sound mad given that we all know what eventually happens to this team and how it all sort of goes wrong in a couple of years, was he decided to pick purely on profile rather than reputation. And this is what he did from front to back, right? He looked at all of England's options at centre forward and decided, okay, the best one is Michael Owen. And he had, since Alan Shearer retired, been partnered with Teddy Sheringham, with Robbie Fowler, with Andy Cole, all great strikers, but all who, similar to him, feed off service from the midfield. But obviously, if you think about it, the best possible partner for Michael Owen up front is a physical foil to him, someone who can unsettle defences, who can drag opposition players around and give him the space to move into. So despite the fantastic club form they were all having, these three immediately dropped down the pecking order, and the emerging, bigger and stronger Emil Heskey was brought in instead. And then he had a look at England's midfield, and Dennis Wise, Ray Parlour, David Batty, they'd all been used in recent internationals for their experience, for their various skill sets, but obviously the best midfielder England had access to in that moment was Paul Scholes. And while those three players all have qualities of their own and certainly get around a bit, the perfect partner for Paul Scholes at that time was someone who read the game excellently and had a really good engine on them. Now, for varying reasons, none of those three are particularly well suited to that, but Nicky Butt, who'd only got like 2 caps during Keegan's entire reign, was immediately brought in from the cold. His game reading was better, his engine was better, he was more youthful, he had a better understanding with Paul Scholes. He was the perfect partner. And this one is admittedly where he looked out slightly. You got Tony Adams, you got Gareth Southgate, you got Sol Campbell. If you're only going to keep one of them, obviously it's going to be Campbell. Now, Campbell is a giant of a man. He's so quick covering the ground. He's amazing in the tackle. He's amazing in the air. He's a proper hulking, physical, ball-winning centre-back. Now, I think it's fair to say in the year 2001, probably England's next best centre-back to Campbell was still Tony Adams, but A, he was getting on a bit, and B, he's of a very similar profile. So what you'd really want then is a Gareth Southgate type who's very good on the ball, comfortable sort of taking it out of defence, who can read the spaces in behind and cover over when someone like Campbell goes to win the ball back. And by a fluke of circumstance, they just happened to have Rio Ferdinand, a player who was about to redefine what that whole role as a defender meant, coming through. So out go Adams and out go Southgate, and in comes him. And then, of course, you add to this David Beckham, who is just an incredible player at this point of his career, provides excellent chances for any kind of centre-forward, has a great understanding with Scholes and Butt, and really wants a nice overlapping fullback to do the width for him when he moves in field slightly. And the right side just completely picks itself. Like Gary Neville was perfect for that role. And then over on the left-hand side, you're obviously going to want to pick Ashley Cole for the obvious quality he has and the things he provides going forward, and also the fact they hadn't had a proper left-back since Stuart Pearce. So all that remains is picking the left-sided midfielder. Now, what Sven really wanted was somebody similar to David Beckham, and that they would come into this sort of half space here to provide more sort of strength in central midfield and support the forwards and allow Ashley Cole to provide all the width. And that would eventually be Owen Hargreaves, but for now, Nick Barmby's fine. And this gave you his preferred 11 for the remainder of that World Cup qualifying campaign. And a mere 9 months into it, they travelled for the return match in Germany, the absolute definition of a shit or bust match, given there's only one automatic place in that entire group. And what they did that night, well, You may have heard about it. By this point, Steven Gerrard had started to emerge at Liverpool as a massive upgrade on what 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 offered this side. He still had the ability to get round the pitch and to cover the space to allow Scholes to play, but also he offered a box threat. Now, I'm going to sound like a complete nerd here, but this is what I consider to be one of the greatest wins of the 4-4-2 formation in its whole history, because there's so many areas here where you think Germany should outnumber England, but the way they played that night was so clever. So this 3-5-2 that Germany lined up with was actually like incredibly narrow in the midfield, given the amount of numbers they had. So what Sven had Barmby and Beckham do was play very aggressive and very wide to try and stretch them out as much as possible. And what that meant was whatever side the play was on, they really encouraged the fullback to not worry about anything going on here and instead get right the way up and support the winger. Now, the problem this creates is you might be expecting this to be a sitting midfielder and then these two eights, but this was Ballack and 𝗘𝗏𝗏, who were both supposed to play deeper than 𝗈𝗊𝗍, who would join in with the attack. So you've actually matched them up 2 for 2 here. Now, given both the physical strength of 𝗘𝗏𝗍𝗏 and the movement of Michael Owen, which we'll get onto in a second, none of these centre-backs wanted to really leave this position to come out wide, so England constantly found themselves with these 2v1s on the flank. Now, yes, obviously this does then give Germany a man advantage here with the extra midfielder with the centre forwards, but England worked so hard off the ball, both Steven Gerrard covering back and shutting off the passing lanes and the fullbacks getting all the way back when England lost possession, that in reality that advantage never told. And with both 𝗘𝗏𝗏 and Ballack playing slightly more conservatively, it meant that Scholes and Gerrard could sort of drift back into the midfield area and find themselves in a 2v1 against 𝗈𝗊𝗍, and if he goes and closes down Rio Ferdinand or Sol Campbell, they pass into the gap, or alternatively, if they would bring the ball out and he'd close them down, they'd be completely free to get on it. But the real key to this 5-1, in my opinion anyway, is the combination play of 𝗘𝗏𝗍𝗏 and Michael Owen. And honestly, if you can find the 90 minutes online anywhere, you've got like a very boring rainy Sunday to kill, go back and watch this, because the way they constantly alternate between which of them is trying to disrupt Germany's back three and which one is trying to take advantage of that, so clever. Like in some phases you'd get Owen trying to get into the channel between the wing back and the centre back to be found with the ball and then drag everyone across, but other times you get 𝗘𝗍𝗏 dropping short, dragging one, sometimes two of the defenders with him, using his strength to get a flick on, and then Owen would run in behind. Now that first approach, Owen running into the channels, is where England get the free kick that the equaliser comes from, and then later in the game, one of Owen's goals, where does that come from? And 𝗘𝗏𝗍𝗏 flick on into the space. And the picture I'm trying to paint here, right, is that this England side was perhaps not the best in terms of individual quality. Like, even some of these players you think about as all-time greats weren't at their peak yet. Ferdinand certainly wasn't. Gerrard certainly wasn't. There was individual imperfections littered throughout it, but the balance it had in every single grouping of players was almost perfect. You've got a dog and cat centre-back pairing, two full-backs that both love to get forward and provide the width, combined with two wingers who don't really want to be going to the byline, can move in field, can do loads of other different things, will leave them that room. Two central midfielders that are both good going forward and sitting deep for very, very different reasons, and read the game well enough that they could alternate when one happened and when the other one happened. A big man, little man, centre-forward combination. Like, this for me might be the last great 4-4-2. Maybe Arsenal's Invincibles if you don't think of them as a 4-4-1-1. I appreciate I'm getting really niche and into serious footballing nerdery territory here, but you got to remember, we're 3 years away from Mourinho coming in and killing this formation forever, right? I think this might be its last hurrah. But it shouldn't have been, should it? The 2002 World Cup should have been 4-4-2's last hurrah, because this England side went into that tournament, again, not with the best team in terms of individuals, certainly not with a lot of depth beyond the first 11, but they should have won it. Now, two key things to address. Gary Neville was injured. He did not travel to the tournament. He was replaced by Danny Mills, who, a similar profile of fullback, would get down the width, but obviously nowhere near as good. And there was no Steven Gerrard, but that was sort of okay, because it meant you could bring 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏𝗏 back in, and he was really good. Sven thought the natural counterbalance to Beckham on the opposite side, and someone who played well with Cole, was Owen Hargreaves, but he got injured in the first game, so we had Trevor Sinclair there for most of the tournament. And similar to Mills, he got the profile right. He was going to do the right job. He didn't present a problem, but the quality downgrade was not insignificant. No offence, Trev. And while, okay, they did not exactly set the group on fire, it was still the group of death in that tournament. And this side took on Argentina and put in another all-timer. There's maybe even an argument to be made that this is a better performance than the Germany game, because it really did show both sides of what this England team were capable of. Like, that first half is very open, there's lots of chances, but England have more of the ball and they have the better of it. Michael Owen hits the post after about 17 minutes. There's other things sort of scattered around, but when they get that lead, they look at the game and think they have got the weapons to hurt us here, and they just shut it down. Like, I was about 13 or something at the time, but even I can remember what a nervous watch this was in the school hall at like 10 a.m. because England sat deeper and deeper and deeper, and they defended more and more and more, and it required lots of work off the ball, some great last-ditch tackles, but they got through it. This team, full of talent, Crespo, Batistuta, Veron, Simeone, Aymar, Ortega, Pochettino, for some reason, they couldn't get through. So they won this 1-0 and they got out of the group of death, and then they smashed Denmark in the next round. And all of a sudden, the eliminations that had happened in this tournament thus far really did open it up. Argentina were out. France, Portugal, Italy, Spain, they were all out. Germany was still in, but I don't know if you remember me saying it a couple of minutes ago. England just battered them 5-1. There was only really Brazil that looked like a challenge, and inevitably they got them in the quarterfinals. And that game showed what the problem was with this team, with Sven's system. And it wasn't that Brazil necessarily were better than England, it's that they presented them with a problem they couldn't solve. Like, England's opening goal is that system working perfectly. You can see once again Heskey and Owen have taken it in turns, one to drop, one to go, and the ball from Heskey after he's found isn't great by any stretch of the imagination, but such is the profile of Michael Owen back then as this predatory, always alive centre forward, that slightly bad touch from the defender, he's onto it and he scores. Tragically, what proves to be the winner has nothing to do with systems or setups or anything that Eriksson had worked on and anything that was carrying this England team through. It's just a really jammy hit that goes over the head of a really unlucky goalkeeper. But it's from here that you see the limitations in this system, because after Ronaldinho gets sent off, Brazil are like, well, we have to shut this down, and they go incredibly defensive. They shut off England's main options, and they just did not have a plan B. And that is just enormously reflected in the substitutions Eriksson was able to make. Like, he brings on Kieran Dyer for Trevor Sinclair. That feels like the biggest change he made in that game. But that is Dyer, who's a direct runner and needs space in behind against a very deep Brazil team, and he's on the wrong side. He's never going to get round anybody and put a cross in with his left foot. He didn't really provide anything. 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏 comes on for Michael Owen, another penalty box striker who's waiting for a chance to drop, like no real change there. And then Teddy Sheringham for Ashley Cole, which is just a by the numbers, get a defender off for a striker. It provided England no other tools with which to unlock a resolute defence. And honestly, this is going to sound mad, right? But I think the thing that stopped England winning this World Cup was Brazil going down to 10 men. Like, I think if that last 40 minutes had been against 11 and Brazil had been as open as they had been in the game before that, I think they'd have found a way through. That's at a minimum going to extra time. It was just the fact that they had to batten down the hatches. England did not know what to do. And then, I mean, you know the rest of this story. Like, the rest of Eriksson's time as England manager was just being gifted yet another once-in-a-generation footballer who just did not fit any system at all. Like, in comes Wayne Rooney, one of England's greatest ever players, and he looked it from being like 17 or 18. So he immediately replaces Emile Heskey up front, which is great, but he couldn't possibly have had less chemistry with Michael Owen if he tried, and he couldn't drop Owen because he was probably still England's greatest goal scorer. And he played for Real Madrid. The industry and the guile and the selflessness of Nicky Butt was replaced with 30 goal a season Frank Lampard, because why would you not want Frank Lampard in your team? And Steven Gerrard, he went from being a very useful, very dependable system player to Liverpool's main man and one of the greatest attacking midfielders in all of Europe. How could you not have him in? This meant that Paul Scholes got shunted out to the left, where he very quickly just said, the hell with this, I'm retired. But that was fine, because Joe Cole exists now. Yes, he's a right-footed player who plays in a 4-3-3, but he's kind of like a left winger. Get him in. And then Sol Campbell, the perfect defensive complement to Rio Ferdinand, was inevitably replaced by John Terry. And if you want to know how much synergy those two players had, go ask Anton. So yeah, in the space of a couple of years, England went from this limited but perfectly balanced 11 to this one, which is so unbelievably full of talent that won everything imaginable at club level, but just did not look like it had a clue what it was doing when it put on an England shirt. In 2002, were it not for just a lob over Seaman's head, would have had Turkey in the semi-final and then Germany again in the final. You tell me how you think they'd have done. No, I'm genuinely serious. The comments down below, like, am I out of my tree here? Am I remembering this team with the same sort of forced early noughties nostalgia that I reserve for 𝗘𝗫𝗧𝗏, 𝗘𝗫𝗏, Jolteon, Articuno, Scyther, and Gengar? That was my 6, by the way, in case you were wondering from before. I also had a Vileplume and a Dragonite for typing coverage, just in case you needed them. All level 100. Obviously, but those were the 6 I tended to use. But yes, if you have made it this far in the video, obviously thoughts and feelings about England under those early years with Sven, very welcome. But if you just want to confuse everybody who hasn't got this far, just put what your starting 6 Pokemon in Generation 1 were. Why not? I mean, failing that, you can just tweet them to me. I would genuinely be interested to know, at Adam Clery across all the social medias, 𝗘𝗫𝗍𝗫. The FourFourTwo socials are in the corner of the video. What else? The latest issue of the magazine. We're edging closer to a very, very special one that I will get to tell about you very soon. Jumble the words up there. But the current one is in stores now. It exists. Here it is. You can go see it. If you find it, pick it up. It is still the greatest football magazine in the world. Treat yourself. Until next time, though, I think this was a really, really long one. Felt like it. So sorry or you're welcome, depending on how you feel about that. I will see you soon. Soon and around. Yeah, bye.